I'm Klarnet.
And I'm Vogel.
And we're gonna teach you about the Haitian Revolution.
Wait, Lev, what's the Haitian Revolution?
Glad you asked. Let's get started.
Montage time! To start off, in Haiti, there are four main social classes. The Grand Blancs, who are the wealthy white people. The Creoles, who are the free people of color. The Petit Blancs, who are the poor white people, who are usually the shopkeepers, merchants, etc. And then, finally, the black slaves, who made up most of the population and are pretty self-explanatory.
First, the Grand Blancs were the rich white slave owners. The French imposed strict laws prohibiting them from trading with anyone except for France. The Grand Blancs broke this law to trade with parts of North America very often.
The Creoles, who were the free people of color, were mixed race, usually between a black woman and a white man. Those who weren't Creoles either purchased their freedom or were let loose by their owners for various reasons.
Fly! Be free! Reach for the stars!
There were around 30,000 Creoles in Saint-Domingue.
The Petit Blancs were envious of the Grand Blancs and the Creoles because the Grand Blancs had slaves. The Creoles were also at the same social level and were competitors with the Petit Blancs. There were only around 20,000 Petit Blancs and Grand Blancs together.
There were around 500,000 slaves. 20% were domestic and a whopping 80% were field slaves. The field slaves were not given adequate food, they had no medical care, and they were not allowed to learn to read or write. The slave owners found it financially beneficial to treat the slaves badly and cheaply, because when they died, they could just buy a new one. Professor, if the slaves made up 95% of all the people in Saint-Domingue, and their lives were so bad, why didn't they rebel?
Ha ha ha! How? What a stupid question. But, since you asked, they did revolt. And sometimes they even revolted simultaneously. The whites feared the slaves, mostly because they were outnumbered 10 to 1.
With this unsustainable system in place in Saint-Domingue, it was one of the most valuable colonies. But with mucho value comes mucho demand.
Since the French owned it, they ordered that 100% of imports and exports had to be to or from France. Since Saint-Dominguez were not pleased with this, they simply broke the law. They traded with parts of North America, giving them molasses and in turn getting huge amounts of dried fish to feed their slaves.
Finally, the citizens of Saint-Domingue got angry about France oppressing them, so they came up with an independence movement. To be clear, the slaves are not in the movement, only white people and Creoles.
Even though they were working together, they did not necessarily get along. The slaves were still oppressed, but they tended to agree on political issues.
So naturally, the slaves started to rebel because they were not included.
Hey man! Ah! The slaves are revolting! Tell France!
Light the torches!
Most of the time, they only communicated with messengers on boats, but sometimes Lord of the Rings beacons worked just as well. Slave owners tried to be even harsher and more cruel than before to scare the slaves, but it just made them more inflamed.
Slave! Angry! But Professor, how could they revolt when they were oppressed and they had no weaponry?
How you would know if you listened to Mia in class, but I'll go over it again. Even though the slaves were not allowed an education, but they still had prior knowledge from Africa. They knew of wild poisons in Saint-Domingue. A slave named Macadal organized a revolution to kill all of the slave owners.
He was going to use the poison to contaminate the water supply and kill all of their master's animals. Sadly, one slave was tortured enough and finally told the slave owners that it was Macadal who was killing all of them. Macadal was brutally put to death.
All of this was starting to give slaves hope to rebel. The French saw what was happening in Saint-Domingue and hatched a brilliant idea to free all the slaves by writing a declaration. They named it the Declaration of Man. Heard about the revolutions in Saint-Domingue?
Ho ho ho! Yes! Bourgeois!
Those people deserve rights.
Yes! The Declaration of Man I shall declare! Bully! And that is exactly what happened. The slaves had heard that they had been freed and rejoiced.
This caused many problems.
The Petit Blancs were now angry because they were at the same social level as the people of color.
Then time passed and Napoleon claimed power and took the throne.
He was a war-hungry tyrant, and he wanted the people of color in Saint-Domingue to become slaves again.
Then there was an epic rap battle of history.
I am Napoleon, I like to say. Those who disagree, well, they don't get to stay. Bow down to my authority, I am your great leader. You're a slave, replaceable, and I am your beard. You're a slave, you'll never get a vote. But here, step onto my boat. I conquered Egypt and Italy. If you want something done, I am the man to see. I won't let this battle be settled by a black. Get back in the field before I give you a smack. I'm rich, upper class, and I'm back from Elba to whoop your ass. I am Napoleon, and I kill the revolution. I care about you as much as China does pollution. You may be black, but I can still ball. What I call my army is the opposite of small.
I'm gonna free the whole black nation. Your entire army is just compensation. First I killed your brother, now I'm after you. The only idea worse than slavery was your failed coup. You're white and you can't ball. You can't be a leader if you're only 5 feet tall. England and Spain and I attacked you. But most of your men, they just died of the flu. Why would you invade the Russia in the blistering cold? Your men froze and starved to death, that was too bold. And all your men died from yellow fever. They died faster than a fastball from Jared Weaver. You wish you could fix your continental system. All those tax good, damn right you missed them. You wanted Portugal, but Spain revolted. Most of yours were killed, the rest bolted. When people say Napoleon, everyone yells boo. Welcome to the Battle of Waterloo, Part 2.
After the slaves won, Napoleon pulled back and stopped attacking.
Hal, I'm gonna level with you. The rap battle didn't happen.
Say what? I know the French were being attacked by the English, Spanish, and the slaves. The Spanish would arm the slaves with weapons to attack the French in Saint-Domingue.
They could not handle all the wars, so they let the slaves be freed.
Oh hey, I didn't see you there. Just touching up on a little history. Did you know that only about 350,000 slaves survived the revolution?
Actually, I did. And one of those slaves was a man named Jean Jacius Dessalines. He was brutally beaten by his cruel master.
After he was freed, he became a general to Toussaint's army. Toussaint Louverture was a military commander for the slave rebellion in 1791.
Jean was well known for his take no prisoners policy.
He was also a ruthless commander.
Ha ha ha! You could say that again. He waved a lit torch near an open powder keg and declared he would blow the fort up if the French should break through.
He considered that a motivational tool.
He also, when he heard that Napoleon was becoming the emperor, he tried to beat him to the punch.
On October 8th, Jean Jacques Dessalines became Jacques I, Emperor.
There was growing discontent for Jacques I.
So they killed him!
Just 3 years after they got their independence, a citizen assassinated him.
Then came a civil war, but we will not go into that because it was not our topic.
We will talk about the Haitian Civil War in our next video.
Until then, good night!
Everybody!